Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener. And thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Evelyn. It's October 31st. Happy Halloween. Today we celebrate the gardener who had his home and garden trashed by the Russian Czar, and the poet who wrote one of his most famous poems, Under the Plum Tree in His Garden. We'll learn about the American landscape architect who never lived to see the big park he had dreamed of. And we'll learn about the horticulturist who created the first international flower show in New York City. We'll hear the October poem about woodbines, or honeysuckle as we know them. And we grow that garden library with an herb-based cookbook. I'll talk about late season cover crops and no, it's not too late. And then we'll have a witty article about shortening tall sunflowers. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. The midwife and physician Dr. Lodog over at Medicine Lodge Ranch recently wrote a post called 4 Important Herbs for Women and Their Health. And the list may surprise you. It includes raspberries, nettles, lady's mantle, and sage. With the raspberry and nettles, Dr. Lodog uses them to brew a tea. And with the nettles in particular, she also cooks them just like she would spinach. She steams the nettles for 15 minutes and then sautés them in a little olive oil with garlic and salt. Dr. Lodog reminds us that the Latin word for lady's mantle is alchemilla, which stems from the Arabic word for alchemy. Historically, people believed that lady's mantle leaves were a fantastic source of water. Like the raspberry and nettles, this herb can be used as an herbal tea as well. And last but not least, she says sage should be used by women who are making the transition into their sage years. I love that. I love that terminology, our sage years. Sage can ease the symptoms of menopause like hot flashes and night sweats. And a cup of sage tea can help you sleep at night. So bottoms up. In honor of Halloween, I wanted to share a fun post from Arts Nursery Garden Home that was shared back in 2014, and the title of the post was 10 Excellent Plants with Black Foliage. Here's the list: black lace elderberry, sambucus black tower, black mondo grass, black scallop ajuga, and then there's 2 weigelias, dark horse, and fine wine. Then brunette snakeroot, 9-bark, Platt's black New Zealand flax, quite a name, and then purple copper beech. Rebecca Vanderzalm did a great job describing all of the plants that are in this post. So if you'd like to check out her detailed descriptions, just head on over to the Facebook group for the show. Just search for the Daily Gardener Community. The next time you're in Facebook, request to join the group. And then once you're in the group, just search for Black Foliage, and this post will pop right up. And finally, on this day in 2011, the United Nations reported that the world population had reached 7 billion. 12 years earlier, on this very day in 1999, the newspaper out of Appleton, Wisconsin, reported that the population had reached the 6 billion mark. So we gained 1 billion people in a dozen years. In that newspaper article from '99, a botanist from the University of Wisconsin shared what he considered to be the state of botany, and he also shared some of his concerns. About Wisconsin in particular, the botanist warned that in 20 or 30 years, Wisconsin will have the climate of Iowa, much drier and warmer. And according to current projections, the global population will hit 8 billion by the year 2024, and it will reach 9 billion by 2042. Now, if you'd like to check out all of these curated articles for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group, the Daily Gardener Community. So there's no need to take notes or track down links. Just head on over to the group the next time you're in Facebook. Just search for the Daily Gardener Community and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the English gardener and writer John Evelyn, who was born on this day in 1620. Evelyn kept a detailed diary for 66 years, and he had an excellent understanding of trees. In honor of Thanksgiving, which is now less than a month away, I wanted to share this excellent quote by Evelyn about the benefits of chestnuts. He said, "Chestnuts are delicacies for princes and a lusty and masculine food for rustics, and able to make women well-complexioned." Evelyn had a devoted passion for gardening, and here's a little-known fact. Evelyn was the first garden author to publish a book about salads, or salads, as he said the word. It ended with an E-T instead of an A-D. Anyway, listen to the benefits of salad as described by Evelyn. By reason of its soporiferous quality, the principal foundation of the universal tribe of salads, which is to cool and refresh, including beneficial influences on morals, temperance, and chastity. And by the way, in case you were wondering, soporiferous means inducing or tending to induce sleep. Some lettuce secretes lacticarium, a milky fluid that's found in the base of lettuce stems. It's known as lettuce opium because of its sedative and pain-relieving properties. And it was John Evelyn who wrote, "The gardener's work is never at end. It begins with the year and continues to the next. Gardening is a labor full of tranquility and satisfaction, and as such contributes to the most serious contemplation, experience, health, and longevity." In 1698, John Evelyn had owned his estate for 40 years. Everyone who knew of it said it was magnificent, both inside and out. It was decorated to the nines, and of all that he owned, Evelyn's garden was his pride and joy. That year, the Russian Czar, Peter the Great, brought an entourage of 200 people to England to visit William III. In a gesture of hospitality, William volunteered John Evelyn's home to host the Czar and his people during their visit. Evelyn and his wife graciously moved out to give the Czar his privacy. Well, it wasn't long before Evelyn's servants began sending him urgent messages begging him to return. When Evelyn came home, he walked into a nightmare. The whole estate had been trashed. Priceless paintings had served as dartboards. His floors were ruined, windows were smashed, and even the garden was destroyed. The servants told how the Czar, who was 6'8", had played a game with his friends where they put him in one of Evelyn's wheelbarrows and then raced him through the garden beds, crashing into walls, trees, and hedges. It was a complete disregard for the sanctity of Evelyn's garden. For 20 years, Evelyn had nursed along a hedge of holly that had turned into a glorious living wall. It was ruined, and the party even managed to knock down part of the stone wall that surrounded the garden. It must have been a scene akin to the movie Animal House. Evelyn sent word to the king about what happened, and arrangements were made straight away to move the Tsar to other lodgings. King William settled up with Evelyn to have his property restored. His home needed to be gutted and rebuilt from the floors up. John Evelyn was 78 years old when this happened to him. I'm sure there was no amount of restitution that could restore the years of love that he had spent in his garden. He lived for another 8 years before dying in 1706. And today is the birthday of the English Romantic poet John Keats, who was born on this day in 1795. Keats wrote his famous Ode to a Nightingale after hearing a nightingale singing in his garden. History records that Keats was sitting under a plum tree, and he scribbled the lines to the poem in a notebook. Another famous poem by Keats is Ode to Autumn. Keats wrote this poem 200 years ago while walking to the Hospital of St. Cross. The most famous verse is, "Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun." My favorite verse is, "Later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease." Keats reflected on his Ode to Autumn in a letter to his friend John Reynolds, saying, "How beautiful the season is now, how fine the air, a temperate sharpness about it. Somehow a stubble field looks warm, in the same way that some pictures look warm. This struck me so much in my Sunday's walk that I composed upon it." And today is the birthday of Andrew Jackson Downing, who was born on this day in 1815. Downing was an American horticulturist and the author of The Fruits and Fruit Trees of America, which came out in 1845. He also served as the editor of a magazine called The Horticulturist. It was Downing who first came up with the idea for a New York park. His dream became the park we know today, Central Park. Downing also advocated for individual states to create schools devoted to agriculture. That hope became a reality as well. In 1846, when the National Mall in Washington, D.C. was run down and neglected, it was Downing who came up with plans to revive the space. He wasn't a fan of the rigidity or the formality found in European gardens. Downing wanted to create a public museum of living trees and shrubs, or at least that's what he called it. Instead of a grand avenue, Downing designed 4 separate parks that were connected by curving walkways and featuring many different trees. Sadly, Downing's plans were never fully funded or carried out. In the summer of 1852, Downing boarded a steamship called the Henry Clay. At some point, the steamship got into a race with another boat called the Armenia. When the steamship began to overheat, a fire broke out in the engine room. Now, on board the Henry Clay happened to be a woman that Downing had dated before his marriage. When this woman had jumped into the water to escape the fire, Downing jumped in after her to save her. She panicked and couldn't stop flailing around, and they both drowned. Before Downing had attempted to save the woman, he'd thrown deck chairs off the top of the boat. Downing thought the chairs could be used by people as flotation devices. And he was right. As fate would have it, Downing's wife, Carolyn, survived the disaster by holding on to one of those deck chairs. It was a small consolation to her for the loss of her husband. Downing was just 36 years old when he died. And today is the anniversary of the death of Richard Morris Hunt, who was an American architect during the Gilded Age. Gardeners know Hunt for his collaborations with Frederick Law Olmsted. They worked together on the Vanderbilt Mausoleum and the Chicago World's Fair. But their ultimate collaboration occurred in Asheville, North Carolina, where they worked together to design the gardens, house, and manor village for the Biltmore estate. When he was alive, Hunt wanted to elevate public taste in design and the arts, but he was also flexible enough to meet them where they were. It was Richard Morris Hunt who said, "The first thing you've got to remember is that it's your client's money you're spending. Your goal is to achieve the best results by following their wishes. If they want you to build a house upside down, standing on its chimney, it's up to you to do it." On this day in 1913, the horticulturist Charles Toddy received a medal from the New York Horticultural Society for developing a new rose called Shell Pink Char. Toddy was a shrewd businessman. On April Fool's Day, 1903, he bought a greenhouse business in Madison, New Jersey. Then he opened up a florist shop called Toddy's Flowers on 5th Avenue in New York. Toddy was responsible for establishing the first international flower show in New York City, and he himself won thousands of awards at American flower shows all across the country, and he was credited with introducing the chrysanthemum to America. In 1930, at the beginning of the Great Depression, Toddy spoke to a group of New England flower growers. He encouraged the growers to pull up your belts and go to it, continuing to grow their businesses during the Depression. Toddy said that it was up to the growers to open up new avenues for their products, and that publicity stunts that gave away flowers cheapened the industry. He cautioned that no other trade gave away anything of value, so why should florists? In Unearthed Words, today's selections were chosen in honor of Halloween. The first one is an old Wiccan harvest chant. Corn and grain, all that falls shall rise again. And here's The Woodbines in October by Charlotte Fisk Bates. As dyed in blood, the streaming vines appear, while long and low the wind about them grieves. The heart of autumn must have broken here and poured its treasure out upon the leaves. And we grow that garden library with today's book. It's a cookbook called The Best of Times by Marge Clark. This book is part of my Marge Clark cookbook collection. Her recipes are wonderful, and her cookbooks are beautiful. The 410 pages in this cookbook incorporate herbs from the garden. Clark was a gardener, so her cookbooks include all kinds of growing information and plant history. Clark's recipes are organized by the main herb used. Her lemon verbena pound cake and her roasted marinated pepper salad are personal favorites of mine. This book came out in 1997. You can get used hardcover copies using the Amazon link in today's show notes for under $4. Here's today's garden chore. Plant late season, cold hardy cover crops in your kitchen or herb garden. If you've never tried a cover crop before, you're in for a treat. Cover crops keep the soil aerated, and they add a layer of protection to your beds in freezing weather. Best of all, cover crops add nutrients as well as nitrogen back into the soil. They're one of the best shoulder season activities that you can do in the garden. Even when you have a cold fall, like we do this year, you can still plant cover crops late, even after the first frost. Thankfully, cover crops germinate quickly, think 7 to 10 days. So amp up your soil health with cover crops now, and your kitchen garden will thank you in the spring. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 1986, the Tribune out of Seymour, Indiana, shared a post about making sunflowers shorter. Here's what it said. A North Dakota botanist has discovered that an herbicide can shorten the height of sunflowers. Being easier to harvest can make the crop more profitable. And he should write a book, How to Make Money in a Declining Stock Market. Ba-dum-bum. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org. And be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.